Okay, although that may not be very helpful because I don't think Google has a lot of stuff on the material that you're learning in this class, but it is open. Okay. Any other questions about the exam itself, the final exam on the 16th?
Can we wear hats?
Yes, you can. Yeah, but no headphones. Okay, I want people to take the headphones off. It's just that for several reasons. One has to do with some people listen to music really loud, so people around the headphone can still hear the music or whatever is coming out of it. So I want people I don't want people to put on headphones during the test. If you want sound isolation, there are much less expensive options. Go to Harbor Freight, pick up a $3 earmuff, and that will do a really good job of blocking out all the noises from the outside. I should ask the lab to stock up like 20 of those things for people to check out, and have alcohol wipes to clean it up. Earwax, ew. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the test. And definitely you want to spend some time to practice with the test because it cannot hurt. Okay, it cannot hurt. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a look at the second question. The first question is done already, so we'll go ahead and start with the second question. And it has the same format as the first one, except the question is not exactly the same. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question. I still don't have internet access now because the telephone lines are down. And I was wondering, can I upload this practice test to a flash drive and take it home and do it?
No, that would not be possible. But what you can do is to download the files, all the spreadsheet files. You can download each individual file into your thumb drive, and then for question number 3, just copy and paste it onto a file. So that way you have the same content as the questions, except you won't be doing it interactively. Okay. Yeah, but you can still get the content onto a thumb drive and take that with you when you go home. Okay, so here's question number 2. Question number 2 is kind of interesting. The subroutine itself, S2, is not challenging. Okay, it should not be challenging at this point because if you look at the structure of subroutine S2, it is almost exactly the same as factorial. Okay, it's not really that complicated. So the only tricky part of question number 2 that I can think of is line 9. Because line 9 has 2 invocations of S2, one embedded within the other one. Okay? In other words, I'm not adding the return values of 2 invocations of S2. I'm using one to feed to parameter n of the other one. Okay? And that's the only part that is kind of interesting. Oh, this is another reminder. Do not use Internet Explorer when you take the test. Okay? We have some known issues with Internet Explorer regarding authentication, and I don't want people to waste time and say I cannot log in, because IE8, still has an issue with logging into Moodle. Yep.
I think we may have had a problem with Chrome as well on the second question.
You mean the third question? Because Chrome does not use the same JavaScript engine, or at least Moodle does not understand Chrome is compatible, and that's why you want to use Firefox is the sure best. It's the best bet that you have got. But we have seen some problems with Firefox too. Occasionally it would crash. Okay, so if you see Firefox crashing, don't panic. Okay, it does not erase anything from your test. It will only crash, as far as I remember, when you download a file or when you upload a file. Okay, so if you just make sure you save your file to a thumb drive periodically, and if it crashes, just restart it, log in again, go to the same question, and attempt to re-upload. Okay, I would try to diagnose the problem, but I think it is really sporadic. It's not happening all the time. It just happens sometimes, which makes it kind of difficult to debug. Okay, so let's go back to this question here. And first thing first, save the file first. And remember, bring your own thumb drive. My recommendation is to bring your own thumb drive so that when you save the file, you're saving it onto a drive that you can take away from the final exam, and then you'll still have a copy of your answer after the exam. Okay, so let's go ahead and trace this program. On sheet 2, comments, line number. There's not much to say about the precondition. We don't have any global variables in this case. We'll start execution on line 9 because line 9 is the first line outside of the definition of any subroutine. And what do I have to do on line 9? The last thing I want to do is print. Okay, I want to print the result. But I want to print the result of the outer invocation. In other words, I want to print the result of this whole thing here. But I can't do it, can I? I cannot do it because I have to first invoke this portion first so that I have a value to pass to parameter n. Then I can deal with the outer invocation. The highlighted part here is what I would call an inner invocation or the nested invocation. The other part is called the outer invocation or just the invocation itself. So are we doing okay so far that we have to handle this part of the invocation first?
Would it be kind of like an f of g of x in math? Is that kind of
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be, if you look at it from the math perspective, this is basically saying, what is the f of 2?
Okay.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not exactly 2, but
Yeah.
But it's just using the result of the function to feed back to itself for the outer one. So we just have to handle this part first. So now the question is, knowing that we have to handle that part first, what do we write down as the return info? Okay. We need to allocate one column for return info and another column for parameter n. What should we write down for parameter n, column D?
0.
Just 0. That's the easy part because we're dealing with the inner invocation, and it is very clear that we use 0 as the argument to parameter n. Fine. That's easy. Now the next question is, what do we write down as return info? So what you need to do is not to say, well, but we haven't seen anything like this before in this class, and start to panic. The thing is, you have to remember what return info is for. Why do we have return info? It is here to tell us when the subroutine is all done, when this invocation is over, which line do we go back to? And when we get back to that line, what will it look like? What are we resolving in this invocation? That's the question. Okay. So once we understand the objectives of the return info cell, then you know that by the time we get back to this line, which is line 9, the print has not happened yet. It is yet to be, yet to be executed. And then the second thing is the outer invocation also has not happened yet. So it also has to be written verbatim, just like before. The only thing that will be substituted by a single value is the inner invocation, and that's the only part that will be replaced by a single question mark. And the value of that invocation will be used to specify parameter n of the outer invocation. So let me just expand this so that we can see more clearly. Are there any questions about the way we set up return info in this case? Does it make sense that we are replacing the inner invocation with a question mark? So make sure you remember or remind yourself about why we are doing this as you work on these exercises and examples. Once we set up column C and column D, we can actually go into subroutine S2 and start execution on line 3. Line 3 is asking n equals to 0 is true. Very good. That's easy. Then we go to line 4. Line 4 is an easy return statement. And with any return statement, we copy and paste the return info cell. We replace the question mark with the value that we are returning, and that's it. Okay, we do not do anything other than replacing the question mark with a value. After line 4, there's nothing else in the conditional statement to do. We get out of the conditional statement, we get to line 8. Line 8 is the end of the subroutine, so that means we have to remember to deallocate both columns that we allocated for this invocation, and then we have to use the return info to tell us where to go back to. Return info tells us to go back to line 9. And we are now attempting to execute line 9 the way it is described in cell C6. Cell C6 tells me that, well, I cannot really do any printing just yet, can I? I have one more invocation to deal with. This time I have to invoke S2 again, and with 1 as the argument to pass to parameter n. Okay? So that means I have to set up return info again, because every time I invoke S2, I have to set up return info as well as parameter n. Parameter n is 1 this time. This 1 comes from this one here. And return info is basically when we come back, what else do we have to do on line 9? Well, since we're invoking the outer invocation, by the time we get back, we just have to print the value out, and we're all done. So are we doing okay so far with row 9 of the trace? Okay. Once we set up the columns, we can go into the subroutine starting on line 3. Line 3 is asking n equals to 0 is false this time because n has a value of 1. That means we have to go to the else portion on line 6. Line 6 is an invocation of, well, it's a return statement, but before I can return, I have to invoke S2 again just to see what kind of value I should be returning. Every time I invoke S2, I need to have a return info cell. I also need one column for parameter n. Okay, let's see what we should go here. What value should we specify for parameter n? 0. That's right, because we are the n of the n minus 1 on the left-hand side refers to the n, which is column D. And 1 minus 1 is 0, and that's why the new column F, has a value of 0. The return info is not going to be very complicated this time, because on line 6, by the time we come back, we still have a return to perform, and we still have the addition to perform. So this part is pretty much the same as the factorial program. It's not any more complicated than that. Once we set up columns E and F, we go into the subroutine starting on line 3. Line 3 is asking n equals to 0 is true this time. We go to line 4, we return a value of 1. When you return a value of 1, you just have to replace the question mark with 1 in the return info cell. And don't do anything else. Remember, do not do anything else. Then we get out of the conditional statement. We get to line 8. Line 8 is the end of the subroutine. We deallocate columns E and F. And then we use return info to tell us, oh, we have to go back to line 6. This time when we go back to line 6, the cell E14 tells us what we have to do when we get back onto line 6. Return 1 plus 1 is easy to do, because 1 plus 1 equals to 2, so we are effectively returning just a value of 2. Return 2 involves copying and pasting the return info cell and change the question mark to a value of 2. We have this cell here, we copy and paste it, we change the question mark to the value that we are returning, which is 2, and then we are done. After line 6, there's nothing else to do in the else branch. We get out of the conditional statement, then we get to the end of the subroutine. We deallocate both of these columns on line 8. So let me first indicate that this is on line 8. Indicate these columns are now deallocated. We get back onto line 9. But this time when we get back to line 9, cell C16 is telling us what we have to do. We just have to print the value of 2. There are no more invocations to perform. So we'll go ahead and execute the print statement itself, and then we are all done with this trace. Yep.
I just had a question. I tried printing out some of the traces at home. Is there any way to make OpenOffice print out the grid lines too?
Yes. For anyone who wants to print out, everything, including not the grid lines and also the labeling of the columns and also the rows, what you need to do is to go to Tool, Format, go to Page, and then you go to Sheet, the last tab,